Well, good afternoon, everybody. And in the world of mayhem and madness that seemingly is going on everywhere in society today, we're going to bring a little calm to your life. And this is people believe that just ain't so. And it does feature the distinguished gentleman sitting alongside or on top, depending on your view, Robert Mills, coming to us from California. Robert, how you doing, sir?
Terrific, Randy. Always a thrill to be with you. Always.
Well, our listeners are really finding you everywhere right now because they can go to our Roku channel at Live Eco Style or Excited Minds Media, and you have your own channel within our network. Things you can't believe that just ain't so. It's a title that has been in work and finding its right. We've had a couple different views on that, but right now that's the one that people remember and they really like. And basically, Live Eco Style provides the opportunity to have Robert share with us his ideas. A former attorney of 50 years, consumer advocate, certainly a mountain climber that has climbed some 56 of the top 57 tallest in the United States, if I get that number right. I think you just went on a 30-mile single hike past weekend, and who wouldn't do that? Me, I would not do that. But Robert, how was it? How was your 30-mile hike? It looked beautiful from the pictures.
It was absolutely spectacular, and one of the most extraordinary things about it is that there's this immense wilderness that's right behind the mountains that are next to San Jose, this huge metropolitan area. San Jose's got 1,200,000, I think, and there's Silicon Valley behind that. And at night, I lay there, and you saw that picture of the glow coming
Yeah.
up over the mountains of this multi-million people over there. But here I am, mountains around me, green grass, flowers, wilderness, lakes, and I'm camped up on top of this little knoll, 8.5 miles into the wilderness. So this beautiful lake, all by myself. There's nobody there. Like I walked 31 miles on this, and up and down these mountains and this wilderness. And I saw a few people, but I mean, it virtually and it goes on from where I went. I went 13.3 miles in, and there's this gorgeous waterfall there. And I wandered around some more in some other places, and um, it goes on for another 20 miles. I mean, it's this immense wilderness right next to this urban area and full of flowers. And it's just, our country has so many beautiful, wonderful places that people, I mean, where the road stops, people mostly stop. But if you keep going, there's some amazing stops, places to see. And I had this experience this past week out there in the wilderness. I had a friend coming with me, but he had just come back from Vietnam, and his wife got sick, and then he was struggling where to go. And I said, look, you've been with her and ate what she ate, and if she got sick, you might get sick, and you don't want to get sick 10 miles in the wilderness. So maybe, he said, you're right. So sure enough, he got sick. So he says, Robert,
Oh,
thank you.
wow.
You saved me.
Wow. Yeah, that's close. Well, you certainly know the right and the wrong answer when it comes to that. I always envy you what you do, but I wished I had the legs to do it. My legs are one leg is good, and the other leg I'd be walking around in circles. It doesn't keep up. But I always admire the views and the pictures that you send. You didn't run into any. So when you go on that, are you using a compass, or is there a trail that you follow, or how does that work?
Uh, I use a series of apps that work off GPS. Um, One calls All Trails, another one called Gaia, Gaia. And you just pull them up on your cell phone, even if you're out of coverage, and down comes, and there's a map, and it shows the days of being lost and using compasses and maps. That's ancient history. You just hold this up and tells you where you are, where everything else is. And I also have an inReach, like I showed you, a little tiny doodad that bounces off the satellites. And it does four things. It enables me to lay in my tent and text my wife, lovey-dovey back and forth. And even if there's no cell coverage, it will track me so she can sit in a computer and watch me in real time.
Huh.
Gives me algorithmic weather forecast to my exact spot and location. And most importantly, has a little button that you can push. and it bounces off the satellites to the Garmin International Emergency Rescue Coordination Center in Houston, where they speak 200 languages, and they do it for the whole world. And it will then contact this search and rescue with jurisdiction of where I am and send rescue helicopters, wherever, to me. And I've seen it used. I've been in the wilderness when it was used, and the helicopter in 20 minutes, you know. So it is an enormous, as you can imagine, peace of mind to have this taped to my backpack, you know, and
Sure.
my wife knows where I am. And if I have a problem, I push a button, you know.
So just out of curiosity, if you had to use those emergency services, do you get a bill a month later for the service
No,
that you use?
that's a good question, Randy. It depends on why you need to rescue, you know, and if you are there because of some idiotic reason, you know, that you went into the wilderness without a permit, without a jacket, with no food and whatever, and you, due to your own negligence, you know, they have the discretion to bill you. But if you get out there and something happens to you that is not your fault, you fall, you get sick, or you get bit by a rattlesnake. Remember the rattlesnake I took pictures
Sure.
of last time? Almost stepped on him. I mean, huge.
Yeah.
And they will not charge you for that. You know, that's just like a regular 911 call, basically.
Yeah,
And
great. Well, it's always fascinating to catch up with your adventures. They're fun to watch and live vicariously through your Facebook posts. So I will take my wooden compass and put it next to my dictionary in my Remington typewriter, and
manual.
my my vacuum bulbs for our TV that we had in our Emerson in 1950s, and I keep stacking all of the things. Being a typewriter repairman just wasn't a good idea for my dad's career, and you know, right after that, and he had just shut down being a TV, you know, repairman, went into a typewriter repairman, and now sewing machine. So, you know, it's but compass, I'll put I'll put my compass aside as long as you have batteries. I guess do you have batteries, or are you solar re-energizing, or you just take a long
Um,
enough
you know,
battery power?
I use lithium I use lithium batteries, and I can recharge. I have my iPhone, and I recharge it, and it lasts for days. And I have the little InReach is a Garmin, and it'll go for days without a
All right.
recharge. And
Well, you know, I know you're fully prepared. That is for sure. We'll review that. We're going to get in actually to the travel section. So, highlights of the past week. If we take a look at the world of our solid, steady state, everything's calm, leaders of the free world. You know, nothing unusual going on. Don't look over here, look over there. And we've all been doged now. I've never expected to be doged, but somehow the term doge you comes up to you know, a different meaning anymore. You know, maybe you should review a few things, Robert, just to you know, unwind, because if you this is brought to you by Live Eco Style. By the way, you can always see updates on Live Eco Style on our Facebook page. I can go to liveecostyle.com. Right there, these shows go to the front page of Live Eco Style. Or you can go to Excited Minds Media TV, a little link at the top of the title of that page that opens up our whole worldwide network. And then if you scroll down, you'll see Robert there standing on the top of a mountain looking majestic and trying to find all of his shows that are on the things you just can't believe that just ain't true. Or just ain't so. I'm gonna have to get that right. Things people believe that just ain't so. I'm gonna get that right. Yeah, I'm gonna get all those words in the right order. Another 4 or 5 months. But anyway, Robert, share with me your pearls of wisdom for the day.
all
And
right, let's start. Let's do a refresher on from our January podcast. There, I predicted, and you know, based on what I understood, that I took a number of the major campaign promises of Trump, and he was just been sworn in, and I said these are the campaign promises that he's promised, which I do not believe will ever come to pass for a variety of reasons. and identified them. And I said, let's go back and review that and see how well we did there. I said that he would not prosecute Biden or Hillary or some of the other his Democratic opposition criminally, and I was right. And he did remove their security clearances and things like that, which are just incredibly petty and stupid, including from his former secretaries of state because they disagree with him. And pulled the Secret Service protection for the kids. And he's going after law firms that supported it. But there's been no prosecutions, and I don't think there will be. He said that prices, he would take care of prices. He would reduce the cost of eggs. That was a big campaign promise. And of course, it was not met. The cost of eggs has gone up. Inflation has gone up. He talked about ending birthright citizenship. And we talked at length about that. That was a constitutional thing. And the judge that was assigned to said this contention, boggles the mind, because it's so clearly in the Constitution, and it's been the cases that interpreted are almost identical to what we have today. And so that's, as we predicted, went nowhere. He said it was going to be mass deportations. There's 14 million illegal immigrants in the United States by various estimates. And he said he's going to deport them all, mass deportations. And of course, that hasn't happened. And the Democrats and Republicans got together and they passed a bipartisan bill to get everybody legal and to fix it. And Trump blocked it because he wants to run on it. It's good, potent campaign stuff, So he said he was going to punish those who protected the illegal immigrants, like the sanctuary cities. So he hasn't done that either. And now we got tariffs. Okay, he said he was going to do tariffs, and I said that tariffs would ultimately fail. And so they came on, they went off, they went back on today. They have resulted in a huge drop in the stock market and lots of jobs lost and no jobs created so far. And many economists are now saying that a recession's on the horizon. The stock market's gone way down. He's done massive harm to our relationships with the world, including, most importantly, our close allies. And the consequences of all this are going to come back to haunt us big time down the road. And especially in jobs lost. Now, let's step back here to the 18th century. The great Adam Smith wrote this book called Wealth of Nations. He wrote that book against tariffs because he said, look, if I own land that's boggy with meadows and I can have good grass there and I cows, and I make great cheese, and you have hilly land that is great for grapes and you make great wine. If I sell you my cheese and you sell me your wine, we'll both be better off. We'll have a better standard of living. And this tariff thing just interferes and it cancels and it reduces jobs. And so that resulted in this whole free trade thing. It built the modern world. And and you would think that somebody who went to Wharton Business School at University of Pennsylvania, as Trump did, would have reviewed the third grade level of tariffs and how they created the Great Depression, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs against Europe causes retaliation back and forth, reduced jobs, created the Depression. It's awesome. I mean, but Trump's ghostwriter, the guy who actually wrote The Art of the Deal, he said that Trump has never read a book in his life, cover to cover. And so one would suggest that this is evidence of it. But, if the theory that some of the apologists have offered for this, that you can go on, is that tariffs will lead to, people buying American, we'll be able to buy American, make our market bigger. But we already have this gigantic market in the world for our products outside the United States. Look at who buys our computers, who buys Apple computers, who buys our cell phones, who buys our agricultural products. California sells billions and billions of dollars of almonds and wine, and other countries, other states, sell wheat. We sell to the world, and they start tariffing us. So this whole thing doesn't make any sense. it's going to hurt us terribly, and it's going to eliminate jobs. Okay.
Well, just for an example, give me an example on car prices, because today, of course, he announced his tariff on car prices. So in 1967, back before lights, telephones, and things that worked, when you and I were growing up, the average price of a car was, I think that Chevy that our dads traded in every other year was about $2,750. Now, the average price of a car today, as they said on the news this morning, is monthly expense on your monthly. Everybody pays for it monthly. Now is $700 a month for your 48,928 average price car, only to go up.
Tariffs. I mean, and I can't, you know.
Well, they what he doesn't understand is every car has pieces and parts from, they're the original United Nations. They have
Right.
pieces and parts from everywhere, and they get tariffed every time they change, go back and forth across the border. It's nuts.
They track the car and it goes. The parts go back and forth 7 times across the border back with Canada. I mean, the parts coming in from everywhere, going back and forth. So let's talk about Doge for a minute. I have been astonished with something happened to Elon. I mean, people say he's addicted to drugs now. He's on ketamine. Doesn't look good. I mean, look at him. He doesn't look good. And so he's been going around with these kids, going into these federal agencies and taking and waving this chainsaw thing around, which he got from the Argentine president, who, interestingly, the Argentine government was full of incompetence, and the new president brought in technocrats and experts to fix it. And Trump is, and that's where they got this chainsaw thing. So they come in and they chop stuff to pieces, and they have to rehire people, and they've gutted the National Institute of Health, which won 92 Nobel Prizes, and they've opened us up to exposure to infectious disease. They cut down infectious disease research, and they saved us last time from the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. And what new, and then look what they just closed the Austin airport today because they're short of air traffic controllers.
Oh,
and there was a picture of these gigantic lines in SeaTac in Seattle, with people can't get through the securities because they're short staffed, and so. And then look at the Social Security Administration is in chaos, and they're closing offices, and you can't get anybody. You got to drive, and appear in person, and so nobody's answering the phones in these things, and so is this efficiency? And I think that my prediction is that all this is going to blow up, because the people who are suffering most from it are Trump supporters. And now, what the Trump administration proposed and to Congress, and Congress passed, was the $900 billion cut to Medicare. And they hasn't hit yet, but when it does soon, when the Trump supporters go to the doctor's going to say, I'm sorry, but it's not covered. You're going to have to pay for that out of pocket, which they don't have. And so that's going to cause a huge blowback. And this whole thing about taking over Panama and Greenland, the Panama Canal, I mean, you see the people showing up in Greenland with these MAGA hats on that say, "Make America Go Away." And they're going to greet J.D. Vance, who wasn't invited. And the Swiss had this big march. And the Swiss are my brother lives there. I've been there a lot. And, it takes a lot to get the Swiss to do, I mean, and they had this big demonstration where they have these hats they're wearing. They have a middle finger, and it was designed to send a message to Trump. And one of them said, "You can now say that blankety blank idiot and say no more." and 90% of the whole world will know exactly who you're talking about, you know. Um, so he's also punishing these universities, closing down, you know, Columbia. And what he's doing is he's sabotaging medical research that would have made you and I healthier and offered cures for disease for our kids and us later, and things that made us the strongest economy in the world. And I can't fathom the rationale for it. I mean, I think that underneath it all, my suspicion is that the universities are viewed in the MAGA world as liberal.
Right.
Um, and really, you know, it's not true in a broad sense. I mean, 90% of the universities out there are not wealthy, big liberal universities. They're just struggling state universities that were almost all the courses are nonpartisan. You know, there's no politics in it. They're just trying to do their job to educate engineers and accountants and teachers and doctors. And, you know, all this is getting hurt. And this is what made America great, was our great universities. And so punishing them in this irrational, just, you know, it's not good. So let me talk about something else here. That, you know, the Republicans have been pulling their hair out for decades about this imaginary fear and contention that Democrats are registering illegal immigrants, migrants to vote. Okay, and that's how they're going to win. They're going to bring them all in and register them. And that's been a theme for the last 10 years in elections. You know, they're bringing all these illegals in. Okay. Um, so, you know, again, they kill the pathway to make them all legal. And investigations have been many investigations about this over the years, over and over again, time and time again. They all show that non-citizens do not vote in American elections. Okay, and when I talk to MAGAs, they come on my history tours in San Francisco and they ask me these questions, and I can't find them who understand, any of them who understand how we actually conduct elections in the United States. You know, in their minds, they imagine this big truck driving into this dingy warehouse in some big inner city controlled by the Democrats and throwing this big sack of canvas votes and say, find me these things, the way Trump did to Brad Raffensperger. Find me those 11,780 votes, okay? But in the United States in 2020, we had 176,000 independent precincts that where the votes were cast. Only people who live in those precincts can vote. There's only about average of 1,100 people in each precinct. The only people who can vote there are the ones who live there. The only people who can count the votes are the ones who live there. And they count them in a room elbow to elbow with Democrats, Republicans, and independents under closed circuit TV. And that's how we count votes in elections in the United States. How are you going to cheat in something like that? You know, I asked you, I said, you know, what it would do to cheat is you have to get everybody in the room, you know, all 15 or 20, how would you handle it, the closed circuit TV and the people watching it? You'd have to get, and then each precinct's only 1,100 people to get enough votes cheated to make an outcome determinative difference would require getting 50 or 100,000 people in on some conspiracy that would send them to jail for the rest of their life, and it would be easily detected by algorithms. And how are you going to get these people who do this are not partisans? They're pretty much good government types, whether Democrats or Republicans or independents. They've been doing it for years in these little precincts that have been there, the same precinct for 100, 200 years. And you can see how people have voted there. So you just can't go in and just say, well, let's take all of these and put them in Biden's column. I mean,
And you know what the problem is that the mass hysteria and the Trump cultism is that they said it, oh, we got cheated. And anybody that's in the Trump cult, you know, they pick up on that, you know, that whole theory that they, you know, this mass hysteria, and then they rely on that as their biggest theory of, you know, they got cheated back. And he still is. He's still harping on it. He won't give up on it. He'll never agree.
I talk to these people, you know, I talk to them about this. They don't know anything about how elections are conducted. And he asks these basic questions about how do you propose, how do you suppose they did it, given this and this and this. They don't have a clue about what they're talking about. And the
Right.
same thing with climate change. You know, I start talking about John Tyndall, the guy the mountain behind me is named for, which he's a big name in Europe and in science, you know, because he discovered, you know, why ice ages came and went. Volcanoes put carbon dioxide in the air. He was the guy who discovered the greenhouse effect of carbon dioxide. Plants and trees take it out, sequester underground oil, coal, oil, and gas. That's a third grader can understand that. That's climate change. That's why glaciers came and went. And you know, since 1957, they started measuring carbon dioxide on Mauna Loa and on Hawaii. They measured it in the air. It's gone up 25%. And if climate change is caused by carbon dioxide, and we're taking it back out of the ground with the plants, took it from when the volcanoes put it in, why wouldn't that make the world get warmer? It is getting warmer. Why? And the answer is third grade stuff. They don't know anything. They've never heard of John Tyndall. They never heard of climate science. And so the same is true with these elections. They don't know how elections are conducted. And you know, they don't know that 3/4 of the human race has had a COVID vaccine. It's 200 times safer than milk. And it causes autism, you know, and so I don't know what you know, it is a frustration of mine. But let me go on here.
Well, let me throw in one thing. I was watching the hearings this week over other issues that we haven't even touched on yet. But the last 2 days they were talking about what's her name, Tracy Gabbard or Tulsi Gabbard, whatever, director.
Yeah. They pulled her because they need her to otherwise they think her seat will go to a Democrat. So they pulled her nomination.
No, this is
Maybe.
I
Go
can't
ahead.
remember. She was in front of the panels talking about the this breach that happened on the security of the attack.
Signal.
Yeah. And anyway, she was supposed to be giving a report on threats to, you know, the United States. And at the end of her report, one of the Democratic panel members said, you know, in the last 19 reports that I've sat through, we've always had mentioned that climate change is a very serious issue and a threat to our, you know, to our country. And in your particular report, there is none.
Right. Of course. I mean,
you know,
the fascinating thing to me about this chat is that I think it was the Atlantic broke this as well. Is you take the people in that room, very senior people in the administration, all inexperienced, incompetent people, but they were very senior, and you could go back to when Hillary Clinton was accused of her emails, and everyone in that room said she should be prosecuted, and it was an outrage, and you know, on and on and on about the security, and you know, and she had a private email server, and you know, she was just using it for her, you know, personal stuff. And they weren't talking about war plans, and they weren't talking in a cabinet meeting. It was just, and they went on and on about her and how she should be prosecuted, and she should this and that and the other. Every one of them in that room sitting there on an insecure chat talking about war plans. I mean, the hypocrisy of it. If you wanted to come up with an example that you couldn't top that example of hypocrisy.
No, and they were talking about people that just the regular people that work in security areas are trained every day that little pieces of paper even left out when they go home, they can go to jail for.
They call it spillage, and they pound it into you, and you would be fired immediately if you did anything. I mean, even one little thing, they would have all been thrown out of government. They would have been fired. So they would have been charged.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
But this is.
But no, nothing happened here. In fact, the commentary news network, they call it news, that everybody on the right side listens to, declared with one of the senators last night that this was just a 2-day issue. It's over with. There's no further reason to talk about it. It's just done. You know, the Democrats had their fun with it, and it's over. And it's
They're
like,
still talking about Hillary's emails, and so
oh,
they
well,
think this got legs. This is going to be with us. This,
yeah. Well, the other thing is Trump now decided that he was going to pay all of the protesters that were part of, that part of January 6th, that he's trying to determine if they all should be paid for their time away from work. I mean that I'm like going, how do you lay in bed at night and think up this stuff? I'm like just
well,
off charts.
he has come up with this week with an executive order. And this is the first of a series of executive orders as seeking to basically, we're going to talk about some more of them in a second here, to overthrow democracy. And I'm going to point out to you the incompetence of it. Once again, it was going to probably boomerang in their face. But by this executive order, he's ordering the states. He doesn't have jurisdiction to tell the states how to run elections. But he said they have to require in-person interviews. They have to require passports, birth certificate, and to allow people to vote in federal elections. Okay, and women who've assumed their husbands' names, that can't match up the name, they can't vote. And so, the House Republicans had passed the SAVE Act, was very similar last July, very similar to this, and it was defeated in the Senate. But other states had passed similar things. All of them immediately struck down by the courts as unconstitutional. But I want to point out, the hypocrisy aside, okay, how ill-considered this is from the Republican standpoint. And then is, first of all, it's going to have exactly the opposite effect. It's not going to keep any illegal immigrants from voting because there are none, okay? But what it is going to do is it's going to disproportionately disenfranchise Republicans. Why? Because if you Google it, you can see that liberals per capita have a lot more passports than conservatives, and Democrats per capita have a lot more passports than conservatives, okay? And in the majority of the heavy Republican states in the Midwest and South, they have the lowest ratio of passports. And the Democratic with the highest Republican ratio, also in those rural counties with the lowest passports, where the blue cities and the urban areas that are Democratic strongholds have high. So who's going to get disenfranchised by this? And then, it's going to just disproportionately reflect, and a lot more Democratic women have accepted their husband's name than Democrats. And so requiring that these things match is going to disenfranchise more Republican women than men. And there's talk about adding some clause saying that they bring a marriage license, they think maybe that would fix that. So here you pass this executive order. First of all, it's unconstitutional. It's going to get struck down. But even if it went through, you can see that the impact, it's designed to keep illegals from voting. There aren't any illegals, but what is practical impact that goes into effect is going to affect more Republicans than Democrats. So now I'm going to come back to some very serious stuff here about that started out with this what was it called, the Tren de Aguas is this Venezuelan gang.
Mhm.
And what happened is that the Trump ICE people went out and found these guys and rounded them up, a bunch of them, and without giving them access to lawyers or due process or taking them in front of a judge, they simply handcuffed them and then drove them out, put them in an airport, put them in an airplane, and flew them to El Salvador. And some of their family members say that some of them are not gang members. Some of them have green cards. They're here legally. They've never done anything illegal in their life. And so this whole process, and so then all the Republican acolytes, including Mike Johnson, start talking about, and Stephen Miller and some of the really extreme people, they start talking this talk that conflates two important things. You know, they talk about how the president has this executive authority as the president, just
Right.
like a general, and you can't go, a judge can't tell a general how to conduct his campaign, you know, and so how can a judge, you know, go into some core function of the judiciary and tell him he can't, you know, under the Enemy Aliens Act of 1798, he can't round up these gang members and send them back because they're invading the country, you know. And the problem with it is that it conflates and confuses two entirely separate things. Okay. First of all, is whether they're actually deportable and criminal and all that other stuff, you know, and let's assume they are. The other thing is due process. You can't just assume, you know, that what the judge is doing is saying, well, they're entitled to a hearing. I mean, this due process thing is so fundamental. What they're trying to do here, and if it works for them, they'll expand it, you know, but is they're trying to just ignore the basic notion of due process. Now, due process is something that is impossible to understate how important it is. It goes back to the beginning of governments, okay? Because for thousands of years, rulers abused people. They went after their enemies and so forth. And due process is so important that it was in Article 39 and 40 of the Magna Carta, which was passed in 1215, in England, 810 years ago. That's how important it was, because that's what the rulers would do. They would grab somebody and throw them in jail and not let them know what was even charged. And there's a long history of that. I mean, in Spain, you had the Inquisition. They'd grab people and they would put them in jail and they would bring them forward. And they wouldn't tell them what they were even charged with. And the same thing happened actually in Salem, Massachusetts in 1792 in the witchcraft trials in the United States, where they actually executed 25 people. And the people come and whisper, the enemies and jealous friends, you know, this person is a witch. And they wouldn't give them any evidence, and they wouldn't give them a chance to defend themselves. They would just, you know. So this all stuff was so important that our founding fathers said we're not going to have a constitution agree with it, unless it has a Bill of Rights that explicitly articulates the requirements of due process. So if you open up,
here's an over and under question for you. What are the chances that our president has A, ever read the Bill of Rights, or B, he would know what the Bill of Rights is? Or has he read the Constitution?
no,
You know,
not. Well,
none.
if you look at Article 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in the Constitution, and it's all of them are about due process. All of them. This is
even the judge that they went back said people in Hitler's Germany seemingly had more rights than the people that were, you know, the concern of the court right now. I mean, come on.
let me point out a tidbit here about Judge Boasberg. Judge Boasberg was appointed to the D.C. District Court there as a prosecutor by George Bush.
Right.
And he was a criminal prosecutor, and he had a perfect record. He got convicted every murderer he was ever on. And his roommate at Yale University was, what's his name? Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh was his roommate. And so here's this guy, you know, and they're calling him this Marxist judge, and they're coming up with all this, you know. And here's this guy appointed by, now Obama put him on the district court. Because here's this guy that the Republicans unanimously supported him, including Mario, who is the senator from Florida, Rubio. Rubio voted for him too, because here's a guy who had a prosecutor, okay, appointed by a Republican with a perfect track record, who convicted every one of these criminals. You know, this is not some liberal judge, okay? This is about as conservative a judge you could come up with except that he was, in Trump's world, he was an Obama judge because Obama appointed. But Obama appointed because he thought that this would be an appointment and it was unanimously approved by the Senate. So this is the guy that, but what they're doing, it's important to step back and say, okay, that what is due process? Let's say, Randy, that you are a murderer, okay?
Mhm.
Let's say you are a murderer, okay? And I am the prosecutor, okay? I can say, I can't just grab you and throw you in jail and say, well, he's a murderer. I have to take you in front of a judge and I have to give you this whole panoply of rights, the right to, have accusers and have a lawyer and due process and have a judge and have a hearing and have, a grand jury, or a preliminary hearing to determine even probable cause to hold you for that crime. And then you have to be convicted with a jury of your peers, and you have a right to appeal, and you have a right to have the judge overturn it. You got to go through this whole panoply before you can be punished, because you are presumed innocent in our law, and in the law of England, any other democracy, you are presumed innocent. It's the burden of the state to prove that you're guilty. So you can't just go out and grab you and put you on a plane and send you to El Salvador. These are gang members, and so even if it were true, my point is, even if it were true that they're gang members and murderers and all this, it is not the province of the president to grab them. He has to take them and put them and convict them. Then he can do it. He gets to decide whether to charge them or not, and what to charge them with, and how to charge them and all that. He can do that. And that's what he's supposed to do. And if they're gang members and they're here illegally and all that, well, fine. And the courts will find that, and then off they go. And no one's going to complain about that. That's the way the system works. But if you allow the president to just go and grab somebody, which they're starting to do now, and throw them in jail without giving them due process or access to their families or lawyers or any of that kind of stuff. Where is that going? That is just an egregious violation of the Fourth through the Eighth Amendment, and the most foundational notion of justice. It goes back to it goes back before that, because it was always abused. I mean, you can imagine power was always abused. It was used by their enemies.
Here's my problem with all of this. Is that it's one thing to have one crazy guy espousing that, we're just going to take people and throw them on a plane and ship them out. But you have, how many, 52, 53 senators, majority of Congress that are Republican. How do these people take a shower at night knowing that they're bowing down to the, dictator, Putin-loving, wannabe, leader of the world for the rest of his life? And how do they, they're going along with it. I mean, they just go along with it because they know, first of all, if they're going to get what they call primary, they're not going to have a job. They're not going to be able to find a job when they leave office. So they have to suck up and do it. But you got all the people working close to him. How well did that go for the last group of people that worked real close to him? Millions of dollars in lawyering fees, trying to stay out of jail. It's not going to change.
You and I go back. I mean, I was in law school, and when the Watergate stuff went on, and I remember, what a model of decorum and process and respect that both sides, Republicans and Democrats, showed each other, and how they dealt with the facts. And when it became clear that, the Supreme Court struck down, Nixon's claim that I'm the president, whatever I do is legal, they said, you're going to give those tapes to the committee. And he did. And the tapes showed that he committed crimes. And then Gary Goldwater, the very leader of conservatism in the United States, marched into the Oval Office and said, "You're out of here. Get out."
Yeah.
And he did. He resigned. And so, this was a time when if somebody committed a felony, or did something wrong, and the respect for which both parties talk to each other, you know. Now you have the president, and I think this is doing as much damage to this country and to our society and to politics as any of this. Is
Well,
that Trump?
people around the world are looking at us going, where did this country go? I
My,
mean,
my brother is in.
the damage that's being done. If you want to sit and see how inexpensive, I just for the fun of it went to Orbitz yesterday to see how inexpensive it would cost to go to France right now. Like a
Yes.
12-day trip, airfare, lodging in a car to a hotel that gets a 9.2 rating. And for I think it was just short of 2 weeks, $1,250. Now, what does that tell you? You know, nobody's
So
going.
nobody's over there.
No, nobody's going. Who wants to go? Um, and you know you're going to walk right into a buzzsaw, or people in Europe are going to look at you and go, "What is going on?" You know, I mean, people from Canada. You know, I have people in business associates that are part of our team that live in Toronto, and where we used to be really great close friends, there's only so much apologizing I can do right now. But, you know, they're like, come on, you know, could you explain to him that a tariff doesn't really make him money? He doesn't understand tariffs. It is a, you know, Stephen Miller, that the gentleman that so-called works for Trump, back in the days in the past, you know, the way that the current, how they bend when they get a judge that doesn't give them the due that they want, they come up with no judge should have the power to usurp the power of the presidency. That's how they spell it out to the Republican constituency today, that they say that the judge shouldn't rule against the president. However, Stephen Miller, 15, 20 years ago, used to just rail against, and this used to have a broadcast that said exactly that. He would take on Biden and all these others that, you know, would get, you know, to make sure that when they got their rulings that they stuck, you know, and that the president, you know, wasn't going to be, you know, not going by the ruling. So they just, it turns it into Bizarro Land. And if people remember Bizarro Land from the comic strips, is where we're living today. They just upside down and is
The
topside.
hypocrisy that you point out
It's the Poseidon adventure. We're
fascinating.
living in an upside down boat, you know.
But you know, the way that Trump and the way that the other members of his administration, the FBI head, talks about, you know, the opponent as gangsters, you know, and Trump
Yeah.
calls the lunatic, and they say that, you know, so this Marxist judge, you know, and you know the way they talk about their opposition as treasonous and belonging in jail, and you know all this kind of language to fellow Americans with whom they merely just disagree, essentially. You know, this is creating a whole horrifying environment that, to me, I'm really worried about where it's going. I read a thing this morning about how there's this new group out there that's called predator hunters, and they go online and they lure members. They put imaginary young men on these websites, and when older men contact them to try to have some kind of romantic encounter with them, they entrap, they have them meet someone, and then they beat them up. I mean, badly injure them, hit them with hammers and things like that. So, but what this is a precursor to is, you know, this a rise of vigilantism that's going to come up against Democrats, you know, and or maybe the other way as well. And so what I'm worried about is the basic fabric of our society, which requires some respect and some, you know, rules and some norms about how we treat and respect and talk about. If you keep talking about the other side as gangsters and scum and criminals that are destroying America, you know, people will start acting that way. And when that starts, you know, it's going to be very, very hard to fix that. And it's coming from the top, but from all of them. And it's very scary because it puts us on a path that other countries have gone on, you know, sadly, you know, that went totalitarian. and or to fascist, to some authoritarian, where there is no, and you can see what they're trying to do is to rig up the elections, to rig up the way it's all handled, due process, the courts, and so that there's only the president, and Congress is voluntarily gone AWOL, and then if the courts are disregarded, then basically there's no district. It's a dictatorship, without accountability. So it's I don't know what to do about this, but I think it's a lot worse now than I would have expected when we last talked about this. I mean, it's getting much worse, much faster, he's skirting up on the edges of ignoring the courts.
Right.
And I don't know what's going to happen. People are saying, "Oh, when he gets to the Supreme Court, they'll smack him down." But what if he doesn't? So we're inching up toward that. But aside from that particular issue, with the due process and with the honoring the separation of powers, is the notion that Americans are just are just going to go after each other in these extremely violent, extreme language, attacks on each other. It makes it virtually impossible for us to work together and litigate and legislate constructively. We got all these problems in the United States that need a lot of help and work, and we have to work together to solve them. And the only thing they're to talk about now is, trashing the federal government and DEI and trans. And other than that, I don't see any effort to reach out and pick out one of the many problems that we have, and try to fix them, which is not easy. And
Robert, I hate to butt in, but it's pushing right up to that 4:00 time zone. And I think to give us a little, let's try this. Next week when we get together, let's look at the United States through the prism of people outside the United States. You have a brother that lives in Switzerland, or yeah. Well, we also
I have Facebook friends in Japan and in Canada and Argentina and France, and so I can ask them, what's their take. I think we know what it is. I mean, they all.
I just think we need a refresher to put a little balance on. We're sitting in the middle of it. And, we have a high school associate, former ambassador from Japan, our friend Toshi, who's a Facebook friend. But I have golf friends that sit around the world. But I think it's time for us to take a look at what the rest of the world is seeing when they look in the aquarium stirred up mess of the United States at this point. But I want to thank you for today. It's always a pleasure. I think our listeners get a lot out of it. That hour goes so fast. And thank you, Robert Mills, for all you do. And thank you to all the listeners for joining us today. We're going to get this all sorted out. I still have faith the United States is going to weather this. Sometimes it's not entertaining. And right now, we hope to make it just a reality pick of what's going on. But anyway, thank you for joining us on things people believe that just ain't so. We're going to keep going on next week. Another one is going to be in the mill, and this is brought to you by Live Eco Style Inc., the Distillery Channel Media LLC, and Global Eco Traveling LLC. And don't forget to go to Global Eco Traveling if you want to get your business eco certified. We have one of the best eco certifications in the world. It took us 14 years to get there, and I'm the one that sits and helps people get certified and understand what that means. So anyway, for Robert Mills, myself, Randy Weckerly, thank you very much. You guys be safe, and always try to leave a better footprint, just the way my grandfather told me to do. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.